The Galactic Concord had ruled the stars for 9,000 years. 12 different alien species sat at the high table, making decisions that affected billions of worlds. They had created peace among the stars. They had ended wars that lasted centuries. They had built wonders that smaller minds could not even imagine. But joining the Concord was not easy. Every species that wanted a seat at the high table had to pass a test. The aliens called this test the Axiom Trial. Some simply called it the Threshold. It was designed to break minds. It was designed to find every weakness, every fear, every dark corner of a species' psychology and tear it apart. The Velkith had created the trial. They were a species of engineers who thought as one collective mind. They had spent 300 years building the perfect test. They were very proud of their work. In 9,000 years, only 11 species had passed. 47 species had failed. The ones who failed were never allowed to leave their home star systems. They were trapped forever, watched by Concord ships, never permitted to spread among the stars. When humanity's first faster-than-light ship appeared in Concord space, the 12-member species watched with cold interest. They had seen this before. A young species, excited by their new technology, stumbling into the larger universe. Most of them failed. Most of them were sent back home to live in their cosmic prison forever. High Arbiter Thysenka was the leader of the Velkith delegation. His body was covered in chromatophores, patches of skin that changed color to show his emotions. Right now, they flickered with a pale blue that meant mild curiosity. He read the file on humanity with growing confusion. The humans were strange. They had invented weapons that could destroy their entire planet before they had cured most of their diseases. They had walked on their moon using computers less powerful than their children's toys. They fought constant wars against each other, while also building networks of cooperation that spanned their globe. They were a species at war with itself. They are unstable, Thysenka said to the council. They are chaotic. They may destroy themselves before the trial becomes necessary. Ambassador UN3 disagreed. UN3 was a being made of pure thought, a crystal that held a living mind. The Resonance Collective had created beings like UN3 thousands of years ago. We said the same thing about the Korath, UN3 said. They passed. Thysenka's chromatophores turned a darker shade. The Korath took 11 attempts. They lost 93 candidates before one finally survived. These humans have sent only one ship, one candidate. The council murmured with surprise. One candidate was either very brave or very foolish. Perhaps both. The human candidate was a female named Dr. Sarah Chen. She was 43 years old. She had spent 20 years studying tiny creatures that lived in the most dangerous places on Earth. Creatures that survived in boiling water. Creatures that lived in frozen ice. Creatures that thrived in acid and poison. The humans had chosen her not because she was the strongest or the smartest, but because she could adapt. They called it resilience. Thysenka did not think resilience would be enough, that the trial chamber was a sphere half a kilometer wide. Its walls moved and shifted with patterns that hurt to look at directly. Inside that sphere, the trial could create any reality it wanted. It could simulate any horror. It could reach into a mind and find its deepest fears. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the entrance. She was small by human standards, with black hair tied behind her head and calm brown eyes. Sensors were attached to her temples to monitor her brain activity. She wore a simple gray suit that would protect her body from the physical aspects of the trial. Thysenka spoke to her through a translation device. Do you understand what you are facing? The trial will present you with situations that cannot be solved. You must either solve them anyway or show enough wisdom to prove your species worthy. Most candidates last between 6 and 40 hours before their minds collapse. The longest anyone has survived was 11 days. Chun nodded. Her face showed no fear. And if I fail? Humanity will be confined to your home system. Forever. You will never be allowed to leave. Chun smiled. Thisenka had learned that humans showed their teeth when they were amused. He did not understand what she found amusing about this situation. Well then, Chun said, let us see what you have prepared. The sphere opened. A doorway of pure darkness appeared before her. Beyond that doorway was the most advanced psychological torture device ever created. Species far older and far more advanced than humanity had entered that doorway and come out broken. Chun walked in without hesitation. The council watched on their viewing screens as the doorway closed behind her. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the trial began its work. Inside the sphere, all light disappeared. All sound vanished. Chun floated in absolute nothingness. She could not see her own hands. She could not hear her own heartbeat. The trial had taken away every sensation, leaving her alone with nothing but her own thoughts. This was the first test. The Valketh called it the void. Most species broke within hours when trapped in complete sensory deprivation. The mind, desperate for any input, would begin creating its own horrors. Candidates would start seeing things that were not there. They would hear voices. They would feel creatures crawling on their skin. Eventually, they would scream and beg for it to stop. The council settled in to watch. They expected this first phase to last perhaps 4 hours before Chun showed the first signs of distress. Some of them were already preparing their statements about humanity's failure. Another young species that could not handle the truth of the universe. Thisenka watched Chun's brain activity with professional interest. Her stress hormones spiked at first, as expected. Her heart rate increased. Her breathing became faster. Then something unexpected happened. After 6 hours, her stress hormones began to drop. Her heart rate slowed. Her breathing became regular and calm. What is happening? Asked Representative Morvax of the Hungering Dark. His species existed as living shadows, beings that had evolved in the darkness between stars. She should be deteriorating. Thisenka leaned closer to his display. Her neural patterns show structured activity. She's not panicking. She is organizing something. Organizing what? There is nothing there. I do not know. But whatever she is doing, it is working. Inside the void, Sarah Chun floated in perfect darkness and began to sing. She started with songs she had learned as a child. When she ran out of those, she moved to songs from her teenage years, then songs from her adult life. She sang quietly at first, then louder, filling the empty void with the only thing she had left, her own voice, her own mind, her own stubborn refusal to be silent. The trial had given her nothing, so she created something from nothing, and she kept singing. 31 hours passed in the void. Sarah Chun did not break. She had sung every song she knew. She had recited every poem she remembered from school. She had worked through mathematical problems in her head, solving equations just to keep her mind busy. When she ran out of things to remember, she started creating new things. New songs. New stories. New ideas. The darkness was not empty to her. It was a blank page waiting to be filled. High Arbiter Thisenka watched her brain patterns with growing disbelief. No candidate had ever lasted this long in the void. The longest previous record was 19 hours, held by a Korath warrior who had eventually collapsed into screaming madness. Chun was humming quietly to herself. The trial must adapt, Thisenka said to the monitoring technicians. Move to the next phase. Inside the sphere, the darkness suddenly vanished. Chun found herself standing on a small platform floating in endless empty space. Below her was nothing. Above her was nothing. She stood on a circle of metal perhaps 10 meters wide, and beyond its edges was an infinite drop into forever. This was the second test. The Velkith called it the diminishing ground. The platform would slowly shrink, forcing the candidate toward the edge. Most species experienced immediate terror. The fear of falling was built into almost every creature that had ever evolved. Candidates would run in circles, trying to stay in the center. They would scream. They would beg. Eventually, they would fall. Average survival time was 4 hours. Chun looked around at the infinite void below her. She looked at the platform beneath her feet. She felt it begin to shrink, the edges pulling inward. Then she sat down. She is not moving, Morvax observed. She is not trying to escape. Perhaps she has given up? Suggested UN3. No, the Sanke said, his chromatophores flickering with confusion. Her stress hormones do not show resignation. They show patience. Chun sat cross-legged in the center of the shrinking platform. She watched the edges come closer and closer. When the platform became too small to sit comfortably, she lay down flat, making herself as small as possible. When it shrank smaller than her body, she grabbed the edge with her fingers and let her legs hang over the infinite drop. Then she started doing pull-ups. "This is impossible," said Representative Vorn of the Korath. His species were warriors, bred for combat and survival. Even they had never thought to exercise during the trial. "What is she doing?" According to her muscle patterns, a technician reported, this is her normal exercise routine. She does this every morning on her home planet. She is exercising over an infinite void. Yes, Representative. The platform continued to shrink. Eventually, there was nothing left for Chun to hold. She fell. The trial expected this moment to break candidates. The psychological impact of infinite falling, the stomach-turning terror of endless descent, was usually enough to shatter even the strongest minds. Candidates would scream until their voices gave out. They would curl into balls and weep. They would beg for death. Chun spread her arms and legs wide like a bird. She turned her body so she was facing downward, watching the featureless void race past her. The wind of her fall rushed through her hair. On Earth, she had gone skydiving 11 times. The sensation of falling was not new to her. It was almost comfortable. She checked her breathing. She relaxed her muscles. She watched the endless depths below her with something that looked almost like curiosity. 3 hours passed. She was still falling. The void had no bottom. And then, impossibly, she fell asleep. The council erupted in chaos. How is this possible? Vorn demanded. She is falling to her death, and she is sleeping? Humans sleep, Thiesenkai explained, though his chromatophores showed he was just as confused as everyone else. They require regular periods of unconsciousness. Apparently, she decided this was an appropriate time. In the middle of infinite falling, her body showed signs of exhaustion. She had been awake for 34 hours. From her perspective, she was going to fall regardless of whether she was awake or asleep. So she chose to sleep. UN3 pulsed with what might have been admiration. She is treating the impossible scenario as merely inconvenient. That appears to be accurate. Chum slept for 7 hours while falling through infinity. When she woke, she stretched her limbs, yawned, and looked around at the unchanged void below her. Still falling, she said to herself. That is fine. The trial detected something in her voice. It ran analysis on her emotional state, looking for the cracks that must surely be forming. It found none. Her acceptance was not resignation. It was not defeat. It was something the trial had never encountered before. She genuinely did not mind on Earth. Humans had a concept they called going with the flow. It meant accepting circumstances that could not be changed rather than fighting uselessly against them. Sarah Chen had spent her career studying creatures that survived in impossible environments. She had learned their secret. Do not waste energy fighting what cannot be changed. Adapt. Endure. Wait for circumstances to shift. The trial shifted. The falling stopped. Chen found herself standing in a new environment. This time, it was worse. She stood in a simulation of Earth, her home city, and it was burning. The trial had accessed her memories. It had found images of the places she loved, the streets she had walked, the buildings where she had lived and worked. Now it showed them all being destroyed. Fires consumed the skyline. Buildings collapsed. She could hear screaming in the distance. This was the third test. The Volkith called it the heart's destruction. It showed candidates the loss of everything they cared about. It forced them to watch helplessly as their worlds ended. Chun stood in the ruins of her city and watched it burn. Tears ran down her face. Her hand shook. Her stress hormones spiked higher than they had during any previous test. Finally, Vorn said, "She is breaking." "Wait," Thiesenka said. "Watch." Chun wept. She fell to her knees in the ash and rubble. She screamed at the burning sky. And then she stood up. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She took a deep breath, and she looked directly at where she somehow knew the trial was watching her. "This is not real," she said. Her voice was steady despite her tears. "I know it is not real. And even if it were..." She paused, gathering herself. Grief is not failure. Feeling pain is not breaking. It is just being alive. She turned away from the burning city and started walking. What comes next? She asked the empty air. "Show me." The council sat in stunned silence. Representative Morvax finally spoke. "She is not breaking," he said. "She is processing." "What does that mean?" Vorn asked. Thiesenka understood, and his chromatophores turned a color the council had never seen before. "It means she knows how to feel pain without being destroyed by it. She knows how to grieve without giving up. That is impossible. Pain is meant to break. That is its purpose. Not for humans, apparently." Thiesenka leaned back in his seat, something cold forming in his mind. For humans, pain is just practice. The trial had a mind of its own. It was not truly alive, but it was smart enough to learn. It had spent 9,000 years studying the psychology of dozens of species. It knew fear better than any creature that had ever lived, and it was confused. Dr. Sarah Chun should have broken by now. Every model, every prediction, every piece of data the trial had collected said she should be a screaming wreck begging for mercy. Instead, she was walking through simulated ruins asking for more. The trial decided to stop being gentle. For the next 30 hours. It showed Chun the death of Earth in 17 different ways. Asteroids smashing into the planet. Plagues wiping out humanity. Nuclear wars turning the surface to glass. Aliens arriving to harvest humans for food. Each scenario was perfectly detailed, perfectly real. Each one forced Chun to watch everyone she loved die in agony. She watched her parents die. She watched her colleagues die. She watched children she had never met die screaming while she stood helpless. Each time, she wept. Each time, she felt the full weight of the horror. And each time, she got up and kept going. High Arbiter Thiesenka had stopped trying to predict when she would break. He was now simply watching in fascination, the way a scientist might watch a new species of creature do something impossible. "She feels everything," he reported to the council. "Her pain responses are completely genuine. Her grief is real, but she processes it and moves forward. It is like watching someone lift a weight that should crush them over and over again." "How?" UN 3 asked. "What is her mechanism?" "I do not know. Perhaps she does not know either. It may simply be how humans are built. On Earth, humans had a long history of suffering. They had survived ice ages that killed most other species. They had survived plagues that wiped out half their population. They had survived wars that burned entire continents. Every generation of humans had faced something that should have destroyed them. And every generation had refused to die. Sarah Chun was the product of 10,000 years of ancestors who had looked at impossible odds and said, "Not today." The trial pulled out its strongest weapon. The Velketh called it the Cascade. The Cascade combined everything at once. Isolation and crowds. Fire and ice. Physical pain and emotional torture. Past and present and future all happening simultaneously. The Cascade created an environment where reality itself became the enemy, where the laws of existence twisted into weapons. 7 species had faced the Cascade. All 7 had failed. Most candidates lasted less than an hour before their minds shattered completely. Chun found herself in a nightmare that defied description. The ground beneath her feet was made of her memories. Each step took her backward in time to witness another tragedy. The sky above her was woven from grief, a swirling mass of every sad thing she had ever experienced. Her own thoughts became visible, taking the form of dark creatures that circled her like hungry predators. One creature was her fear of failure. Another was her guilt about a friend she had hurt years ago. Another was her secret terror that she was not good enough, that she would never be good enough. They surrounded her, dozens of them, all the dark parts of herself given form and teeth. They attacked. Chun ran. The creatures chased her. The ground shifted and changed, showing her father's funeral, her first heartbreak, the day she had learned her research grant was denied. The sky wept tears that burned like acid. The air itself seemed to push against her, refusing to let her escape. She ran for what felt like hours. Maybe it was hours. Time had no meaning in the Cascade. Finally exhausted, she stopped. The creatures descended on her. They tore at her mind, ripping open old wounds, exposing fears she had buried for decades. She felt herself starting to fade, her sense of self beginning to dissolve under the assault. And then, in the middle of chaos, something changed. She stopped fighting Dot in the observation chamber. Morvax leaned forward in alarm. "She is surrendering. The human is giving up." "No," Desenka said slowly, his chromatophores flickering with something that might have been awe. "Watch. This is something else." Chun sat down in the middle of the nightmare. The creatures of her own psychology surrounded her, still clawing at her mind. But she did not resist them anymore. Instead, she reached out and touched one Dot. It was the creature made of her fear of failure. It was ugly, twisted, covered in scales of doubt and teeth of self-hatred. It had been chasing her and tormenting her for her entire life. She touched it gently, like she might touch a frightened animal. "I know you," she said to it. Her voice was calm, despite everything. "I have known you my whole life. You are not my enemy. You are just part of me." The creature froze. It did not know how to react. Nothing had ever treated it with kindness before. "I have been so afraid of you," Chun continued. "I have run from you for so long. But you were only trying to protect me, were you not? You were trying to keep me safe by warning me about all the ways I might fail." The creature made a sound that might have been confusion. "Thank you," Chun said. "Thank you for trying to protect me. But I do not need you to be a monster anymore. You can come home now." She opened her arms. The creature dissolved. Not destroyed. Not defeated. Integrated. It flowed back into her, becoming part of her again, but no longer separate. No longer hostile. One by one, Chen approached each creature. Her guilt. Her shame. Her secret fears and private horrors. She acknowledged each one. She thanked each one for trying to protect her in its own twisted way. She welcomed each one back into herself. The nightmare did not disappear, but it changed. The chaos became complexity. The horror became merely difficulty. The impossible became merely hard. Chun stood in the eye of a storm she had created, surrounded by swirling madness, and she looked at it with wonder. "This is actually beautiful," she said. "I never realized how beautiful my own mind could be." In the observation chamber, the council was silent. Thisenka finally spoke. "She is not enduring the trial," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She is befriending it." "That is not possible," Vor insisted. "The cascade is designed to be impossible. It cannot be befriended. And yet," Thisenka pointed at the display, "look at her. She has turned the trial's greatest weapon into a work of art. She has transformed torture into therapy." UN3 pulsed with complex emotions. What kind of species makes peace with its own nightmares? The kind that has lived with nightmares for so long that they have learned to love them. Thisenka's chromatophores were cycling through colors faster than his species usually expressed. The kind that treats horror as just another environment to adapt to. Chun was dancing now. Dancing in the middle of a psychological hurricane that had destroyed 7 other species. Her eyes were closed. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. The trial watched her and felt something it had never felt before in 9,000 years of operation. Uncertainty. It had broken countless minds. It had shattered species that were older than humanity by millions of years. It had been designed by the greatest engineers in the galaxy to be the ultimate test of psychological endurance. And this small human woman was enjoying herself. The trial began to wonder, for the first time, if it was the one being tested. 63 hours into the trial, High Arbiter Thisenka called an emergency meeting of the council. He had not slept. His chromatophores had been cycling through colors so rapidly that other members of his species were concerned for his health. He stood before the 12 representatives of the Galactic Concord and spoke words that had never been spoken before in 9,000 years. "We have a problem. The human is not breaking." "Then increase the intensity," said Vorn of the Korath. His species valued strength above all else. They believed any obstacle could be overcome with enough force. "Push harder. Find her limits." "We cannot push harder." Thisenka brought up his data displays for the council to see. "The trial is already operating at maximum capacity. We have used scenarios that have never been survived." "She has survived all of them." The council stirred with unease. "Perhaps the trial is malfunctioning?" suggested Representative Hollowsong of the musical spheres, a species that existed as living sound waves. "Perhaps it is not delivering the scenarios correctly?" "The trial is functioning perfectly. Every test has been delivered at full strength. Every horror has been experienced completely." Thisenka paused, struggling to find the right words. "She feels everything we throw at her. Her pain responses are genuine. Her fear responses are genuine. She is not somehow immune to our tests." "Then how is she surviving?" Morvax demanded. "She is surviving because she does not believe that failing is possible." The council fell silent. "Explain," UN3 said eventually. Thisenka organized his thoughts. This was difficult to explain because it went against everything the Velkith understood about psychology. Most conscious beings have a fundamental belief in their own limits. They know they have a breaking point. When they approach that point, they begin to expect failure. And that expectation becomes reality. They break because they believe they will break. "That is natural," Vorn said. "That is how minds work." "Yes, for most species." Thisenka highlighted Chun's brain scans. "But this human does not believe in breaking points. It is not a conscious choice. It is built into the deepest levels of her psychology. She genuinely cannot imagine giving up. Every setback is temporary. Every failure is a learning experience. Every impossible obstacle is just something she has not figured out yet. That is irrational, Hollow Song observed. Hope without evidence is delusion. Yes, and yet her delusion works. Her belief that she will not break seems to actually prevent her from breaking. She has turned the trial from a test of endurance into a puzzle to be solved. And her species is very good at solving puzzles. Representative Grave Tender of the Eternal Garden spoke for the first time. His species tended forests that spanned entire planets, thinking on timescales of centuries. You are saying that humans survive not despite being irrational, but because of it. I am saying that humans have evolved a form of psychology we have never encountered before. They do not process hardship the way other species do. They do not see suffering as something to be endured until it ends. They see it as, This and Ka searched for the right term. They see it as training. Training for what? Morvax asked. For the next hardship. And the one after that. And the one after that. Their species has faced extinction dozens of times. Ice ages, plagues, self-inflicted wars that nearly destroyed their civilization. Each time, they survived. Each time, they came back stronger. They have developed a psychology that treats catastrophe as just another obstacle to overcome. UN3 pulsed with concern. You are describing a species that becomes stronger through suffering. Yes, that is terrifying. Yes. The council sat with this information in uncomfortable silence. They had designed the trial to find species worthy of joining the Concord. Worthy meant capable of enduring hardship without being destroyed by it. But they had never imagined finding a species that actually thrived on hardship. Finally, Vorn asked the question they were all thinking. What happens if she passes? Then humanity joins the Concord. That is the law we established 9,000 years ago. I know the law. I am asking what happens to the Concord when we admit a species that cannot be broken. Vorn's massive form shifted with agitation. A species that looks at our worst tortures and calls them enjoyable. What happens when that species spreads among the stars? No one had an answer. Grave Tender spoke slowly, his voice like wind through ancient trees. Perhaps we should consider the possibility that we have been wrong about what we are measuring. What do you mean? Thiesenka asked. We designed a trial to test for endurance, the ability to survive suffering. We assumed that a species that could survive our tests would be mature enough to join galactic civilization. The ancient being paused. But perhaps survival is not the same as maturity. Perhaps this human is surviving not because she is wise, but because she is too stubborn to die. Is there a difference? Morvax asked. I do not know, but I think we are about to find out. In the trial chamber, Chun was still navigating the aftermath of the cascade. She had integrated her psychological demons, but the nightmare landscape remained. She walked through twisted versions of her own memories, climbing over obstacles made of crystallized regret and swimming through rivers of old grief, and she was humming to herself, the same song she had sung in the void 70 hours ago. She had not forgotten it. She had not forgotten anything. Every horror the trial had shown her was still there in her mind, still painful, still real. But pain was not the same as defeat. Humans had known this truth for longer than they had known how to write. A wound could hurt and still heal. A loss could break your heart and still be survived. Life was not about avoiding suffering. It was about learning to carry it. Sarah Chun had spent her career studying creatures that lived in impossible environments. She had seen bacteria thriving in boiling acid. She had seen worms living next to volcanic vents that would cook any other life form. She had learned the fundamental truth that life did not survive by being protected from hardship. Life survived by adapting to hardship until hardship was just another kind of normal. She was adapting now. The trial watched her progress with something that, in a machine, might have been called nervousness. It had never encountered a mind like this before. Its model said she should have broken hours ago. Its prediction said she should be begging for mercy. Instead, she was exploring the nightmare like a tourist exploring a foreign country. Interested, curious, sometimes afraid, but never paralyzed. What are you? The trial asked itself, a question it had never needed to ask before. What kind of creature are you? The human could not hear the question, but she answered it anyway, in the way she moved and breathed and kept going despite everything. She was human. And humans did not stay down no matter how many times you knocked them over. No matter how impossible the odds. They got up. They adapted. They survived that, and then they came back for more. On the 72nd hour, the trial did something it had never done before in 9,000 years. It stopped. Sarah Chun found herself standing in a white void. No nightmares. No horrors. No tests. Just pure white emptiness stretching in every direction. Then something appeared before her. It was not quite solid, not quite real. It was a shape made of pure information, a geometric form that pulsed with computational light. It was the trial itself, giving itself a form she could see. You are unprecedented, the trial said. Its voice was the combination of 1,000 different tones, like an orchestra speaking as one. I have searched my entire memory. I have reviewed every candidate who has ever entered my chamber. No one has ever reached this point. I have no more scenarios to give you. Chun blinked in surprise. Whatever she had expected, it was not this. You are talking to me? I am required to give a verdict at the end of the trial. I am supposed to declare whether a species is worthy of joining the Concord. But I do not know what verdict to give. Because I passed? Because you did not pass. Not in the way passage is supposed to work. The trial's form flickered as it processed its confusion. Passage requires either solving the scenarios I present or surrendering with dignity. You did neither. You simply experienced them, as if they were not tests at all. What were they supposed to be? Breaking points, limits, the edges of your mind where sanity becomes madness. I was supposed to push you until you found your breaking point, and then see how you handled it. Chun thought about this for a moment. Then she laughed softly. I do not think I have a breaking point. At least not the kind you were looking for. That is impossible. Every mind has limits. Maybe, but I have never found mine. Chun shrugged, a simple human gesture that contained centuries of stubborn survival. I have been scared. I have been in pain. I have wanted to give up more times than I can count. But wanting to give up is not the same as actually doing it. Every time I wanted to stop, I found one more reason to keep going. What reasons? I showed you the death of your world. I showed you the loss of everything you loved. What reasons could possibly remain after that? Curiosity, mostly. Chun smiled at the trial's obvious confusion. I wanted to see what came next. Even when what came next was more pain, I wanted to see it. I wanted to know. That is how humans work. We would rather suffer and learn than be comfortable and ignorant. The trial processed this for a long moment. Then it spoke again, its voice somehow different. Less cold, almost respectful. I have one final scenario. It was never meant to be used. It was designed only as a control, a way to measure the absolute baseline of failure. No candidate has ever received it because all candidates fail before reaching this point. Tell me, you will experience the heat death of the universe, the absolute end of all existence. You will be conscious as the last stars die, as the last particles decay, as entropy reaches its maximum and nothing remains. You will be alone at the end of everything, and there will be no coming back. Not even in simulation. For as long as you experience it, it will be completely real. Chum was quiet for a moment. The trial watched her vital signs, expecting fear. It found fear, yes. Her heart rate increased. Her stress hormones spiked. She was genuinely, deeply afraid. But beneath the fear was something else. Something the trial had never detected in any candidate before. Excitement. That sounds terrifying, Chun said. It is. It is designed to be the ultimate horror. The final proof that no mind can withstand everything. I know. Chun rolled her shoulders like an athlete preparing for a race. And honestly, I have always wondered what that would feel like. Let us do it. The trial observed her biosigns again, checking for errors. There were none. This human was afraid of experiencing the end of all existence, and she was also eager to experience it. You are anticipating this scenario? The trial asked. You want to experience it? I am human, Chun said simply. We have spent our entire history running toward things that terrify us. It is what we do. Dangerous animals? We hunted them. Vast oceans? We built boats. The void of space? We strapped ourselves to explosions and launched ourselves into it. She grinned. Fear is just our way of telling ourselves that something is important enough to pay attention to. She took a deep breath. So yes, show me the end of everything. Show me true nothingness. And if there is any way to find meaning even in that, any way to learn something from the death of the universe itself, I will find it. The trial was silent for a long time. When it spoke again, its voice had changed completely. It sounded almost alive. Dr. Sarah Chun of Earth, you have completed the Axiom trial. Chun frowned. But I did not do the last scenario. The last scenario is not a test of endurance. It is a test of approach. I asked you to face the absolute end of existence, and your response was curiosity. Your response was eagerness to learn. Your species does not merely survive horror. The trial paused, finding the right words. You transmute it into adventure. You do not merely endure the impossible. You find it enjoyable. The white void dissolved around Chun. She found herself standing outside the trial sphere, blinking in the normal light of the observation chamber. Around her stood the 12 representatives of the Galactic Concord. Desenka stepped forward. His chromatophores were cycling through colors that Chun could not interpret. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then he spoke the formal words. Humanity is granted membership in the Galactic Concord. Chen let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. 72 hours of torture, and she had done it. Humanity was free to explore the stars, but Desenka was not finished. In a lower voice, almost too quiet for the translation device to catch, he added something else. May the universe have mercy on us all. Chun laughed. It was a sound of pure exhaustion and joy. The sound of someone who had walked through fire and come out the other side still smiling. Do not worry, she said. She extended her hand in the human gesture of friendship and alliance. We do not bite. She paused, her grin widening. Much. Desenka looked at her extended hand, then at the other council members. Slowly, hesitantly, he reached out and took it. Human skin touched Velkith's skin for the first time in history. Welcome to the Concord, he said. I suspect things will be very different from now on. I suspect you are right. Chun shook his hand firmly. The grip of a species that had been shaking hands and making deals since before they had discovered fire. But different is not always bad. Sometimes different is exactly what you need. Behind them, the trial sphere sat silent and dark. It had tested thousands of candidates over thousands of years. It had broken species that were older than humanity's oldest ancestors. And today, for the first time ever, it had found a species that made it feel something new. Hope. Because if humans could face the worst, the universe had to offer and call it enjoyable. Then maybe, Just maybe, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Whatever darkness waited in the depths of space. Whatever horrors the future might bring. Humanity would not break. Humanity would adapt. Humanity would survive. And somewhere along the way, they would probably find a way to have fun doing it. That was just how humans worked.